Hello and welcome to Self Talk. I'm your host, Rachel Astarte. Troy Hadeed is a yoga teacher, author, and social entrepreneur who is continuously excavating the human experience while aiming to make God more accessible, discover what it truly means to embody love, and aid humanity in realizing that we are far more connected than we have been led to believe. He has walked coast to coast across Central America, navigated the world on a ship, spent prolonged periods in silence and darkness, and is continuously seeking to make sense of the human experience. Troy is also the author of My Name is Love, We're Not All That Different, a book about universal love and how we can get out of our own way so that it can come through us. Welcome, Troy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rachel. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me and giving people like me a voice, an opportunity to share.
Yeah. And you're
Yeah.
you're in Trinidad now, yeah?
Yeah, I'm in Trinidad, like I was mentioning to you a few minutes ago. Life happens. So right now I'm sitting on the floor of a tire shop for this
Whatever it
call,
takes.
Yeah, whatever it takes. Life does its thing, and we sometimes we have to push back, sometimes we have to surrender, sometimes we go with the flow. So I'm going with the flow.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
So if
yeah,
you could share for the listeners how you came to this path that you're on, this life path that you're on. I mean, it's a long story, I'm sure, but
yeah,
what
yeah.
what what brought you to this life purpose?
Yeah, such a loaded question.
I'm famous for those.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I believe everything really. Everything from the day of born, which has conditioned me or nurtured me along a certain path, guides us to where we are. But to answer your questions in more real terms, when I was really young, Rachel, I had a lot of questions, lots of questions, and I think due to due to the influence of certain inputs in my life, one being a relationship with this man that a lot of people might know as Jesus, and the influence of this individual who now has a movie taking North America by storm, Bob Marley.
Mm.
I think through the influence of those two individuals when I was really young, I think it planted within me these seeds of almost like a responsibility to make the world a better place and to look for truth and understanding and what it really meant to embody love. And those are seeds that were planted in me at a really young age. So I think from that really young age, you commit to these things throughout our life, and life brings you these experiences and these opportunities upon which you can further your desire and create a life that ways in which you want to be of service.
Mhm.
So I think those are things very early that led me along the path that I am now. When I was 14 years old with my first influence of yoga, and I've been now teaching yoga for over 15 years. And that influence at 14 years old, I never really thought much of it. I left university at 21, and when I came back home, people would say, well, what are you going to do with your life? I'll say, well, I'm going to be a yoga teacher. I'm going to teach yoga. And they'd say, well, do you do yoga? I'd say, like, no, but I know I'm going to teach yoga. It's just, one thing after another is what I would say, Rachel. If we really listen to our intuition, and one thing leads us to another, which leads us to another, and here I am.
Yeah. Yeah. So Jesus
Yeah,
and Bob Marley,
yeah,
that's quite a support team. Um,
yeah, yeah.
what is it about these men? What was it that influenced you? What was it that resonated with you that said, yes, that resonates with me? What were their teachings, or their, I mean, they both had a great number of teachings, but what was the congealing message that resonated with you?
Yeah, of course that has unfolded and continues to unfold over years, right? And time I'm referencing, it's a time when I was like 6, 7 years old. I've been so obsessed with these two individuals, even younger maybe. But so that has unfolded over years as I begin to study and really rip apart what these men represented and the conditioning and narratives that come along with them, right? But to answer your question, I would have to say that it is, in a nutshell, love, but it's also a love that is revolutionary, a love that is courageous, and a love that is willing to put this individual self aside to serve something greater. And that's what I see in these two men, in both of them.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. And it makes it like, I can see the leap, but I wonder if you can share the leap between that and yoga.
Yeah. Oh, 100, and I think I'm so glad you asked that question, Rachel, because I think the concept of yoga, and not just in the West, even as a Western man of light skin, who's been to India several times, I will also say that I do believe the depth of yoga philosophy and practice and the foundation of it's being lost.
Mm-hmm.
It's being forgotten in both Eastern and Western worlds, right? So here's what I would say is that, it's in the very first two teachings of yoga, first two yoga sutras to me. Atha Yoga Nushasanam says yoga is now. And then there's Yoga's Chitta Vritti Nirodha, which speaks to yoga being a quieting of the fluctuations of the mind. And through the practice of yoga, if practiced in an intimate, intentional way, we can begin to quiet the noise of the mind. When we quiet the fluctuations of the mind, is really when we learn to be present and live in the present moment. And in this moment right now, Rachel, there's no Rachel and Troy. If I were to be present, no one ever told me that this individual in front of me or this body is called Rachel. And I have forgotten what my name is, so I'm not Troy. So in this witnessing of an experience, the past and the future dissolves. And we begin to witness the human experience as it is, which is a divine creation. So we begin to see God in everything and everyone, And, in my book, towards the end of it, I define what it means to love in a loose term. And to me, what it means to love is to see God, to see divinity in the eyes of every human being, in all of creation, but then to act accordingly. Mm. So, and it doesn't mean that we always have to be a yes man and life is full of rainbows and butterflies and cuddly. But what I mean is the human experience is what it is for a reason. It's challenging, it's filled with conflict, it's uncomfortable. But in our conflict, in our disagreement, in our drawing of boundaries and saying no, can we still do that with understanding, compassion, love? Can we still do that as if we're in relationship to God?
Yeah. And that's reminds me of Ram Dass saying, treat everyone you see or everyone you meet like God in drag, which
Yeah,
is such a
yeah,
wonderful thing. Yes, absolutely. And what I teach as well is when we do create boundaries, they are not to separate us from another, but to bring us closer,
yeah,
right? Because we can interact with other people in a much more authentic way, a way that
yeah,
honors them and a way that honors us, and so that's a really, really important point, I think, that you
yeah.
make. Hmm.
Yeah, where I envision it, Rachel, it's almost like we're all here and everyone has a particular curriculum. Everyone has a different curriculum to walk in this spiritual school of life, right? And I am part of your curriculum and you are part of mine, which means that my mistakes, my flaws, my shortcomings, even my misalignments might be there to teach you compassion, forgiveness, empathy, while it teaches me to overcome shame and guilt. But we're so intertwined, all of us. And if we could just recognize and remind ourselves that, someone else's growth is also our growth. Their realization, their pain, their suffering, it's all ours as well, and vice versa. And when we begin to glimpse that, it takes on a different shape, takes on a whole different shape.
Yeah, I think that's also extremely important, and that it changes the way that we have interactions with other people, and to see them as individuals, yet not separate from us.
Yeah,
It's a beautiful paradox, right?
yeah. And I like to see it like conditioning, like we're all bags of conditioning, right? We're seeds of God with bags of conditioning.
Mhm.
So I don't have to love your conditioning, right? I might disapprove and push back against your conditioning, but I can do that and still love you.
Yes. Yeah.
And if we can begin to see past one another's conditioning, then forgiveness is no longer an option, it's inevitable. Healing may have to happen, and we may have to do work. It may not happen today, but forgiveness is inevitable as long as we're able to recognize that someone is not their conditioning, you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I work with people all the time about this. Well, that person hurt me, and if I forgive them, then they might feel like what they did is okay. And it really comes back to what you were saying earlier about, you know, this is part of your teaching too. This is part of your lesson that you're learning too. There's
yeah, yeah,
The Buddhist saying that, if someone makes you angry, thank them, for showing you what
yeah,
you need to work on. Yeah.
yeah. And furthermore, we love to say all these things, Rachel, like I am not my body, I am not my mind, and all this kind of stuff. Well, if I am not my physical body and I understand that, you can't actually do anything to me. Nothing is personal. I just happen to be in your path and you're doing the best you can, and I might get hurt and I might be a casualty to your journey, but it's so important for us to recognize that it's not personal. Like Ramdas said, we're just walking one another home. Sometimes we might trip and fall. Sometimes someone else might trip us by accident.
Mhm.
But it's just not personal. We're all just doing our best.
Yeah. I love that saying
Yeah,
too. That's one of my favorites. And it really
yeah,
is true. When we see that, then we can see, even if we have a conflicting moment with someone else, we're still helping to lift each other up. if we're doing it in a grounded kind of conscious way, you know.
Yeah, we may not recognize it in that moment,
Right.
you know, but I'm pretty sure if we walk away from a situation of conflict or even a situation where we lose our shit, you know, I always the question is always, how could I have responded differently?
Mm-hmm.
How could I have been better? And it might take a long time for us to recognize that.
Yeah.
But I do believe it comes. I do believe it comes.
Yeah. And non-judgment is so important
Yeah.
of self and other to say, yeah, I might have made a mistake here. And that's okay because I'm a
Yeah.
human being. So let's
Yeah.
just shift how we do things from now on. Yeah.
Yeah. And I am recently, you know, Rachel, I've had to recognize that there's a difference between judgment and discernment.
Absolutely. 100%.
And I think you know, because many years ago, I was, you know, when we're young along this journey, and we're still all young, but there are times when we can get very militant and hard and judgmental against all things that we believe is out of alignment. And we fail to recognize that it's all part of the journey. It's just all part of the miracle. And because I have been in that space before, I'm so careful now not to be in that judgmental space again. And I'm so conscious of that sometimes I lose myself and I lose the discernment. You know, so I'm like, I don't want to be judgmental, so I allow everything in. And I forget that the things that serve me and the things that don't, and the things that are in alignment with where I am and what I'm trying to create in my life, and the things that don't. And it doesn't mean I have to judge something as bad or completely write it off. But I need to be really careful as to what I allow in and how I allow it in, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that that's important too.
Absolutely. So let's
Yeah.
talk about God for a moment. What
Yeah.
when you what do you mean when you say you encourage people to redefine their relationship with God?
Yeah, it's the first chapter of my book. It's called Redefining God. And you know, I'm very close and have always been to spirit or God or whatever you want to call it. And I feel that so deeply inside of me. But I recognize that a lot of people in our world and our society have moved away from God. Maybe they've moved away from the word God, but still believe in some intelligence. Maybe they moved away from God completely. And I can understand why, Rachel. Like if you look at religion and the fact that religion has put the idea of God into a box and force-fed it to so many people for so long. And there actually have been a lot of misalignment brought to our world that has been done in the name of God. So I completely understand why someone might choose not to believe in God or not to nurture a relationship to God. But here's the thing. If we don't relate or connect to any idea of any consciousness or intelligence that is larger than we are, then Rachel and Troy will always remain separate. In the reality that I choose to exist in, there is an intelligence that existed before we do. But you can't be told of that intelligence. You have to experience it to understand it. It's like I can't tell you of the taste of a fruit and have you understand it. You can repeat what I tell you, but you'll never really know it. To really know and experience that, you have to cultivate your own relationship to it. So that way you can experience it and know it rather than just be told of it. So what I invite people to do is, it would be a shame if we allow, or if anyone allows, anything that has been done or said historically in the name of God or spirit to rob them of a personal relationship to that.
Yeah, I love that.
It would be an absolute shame. So I invite every individual, no matter what, to redefine their own relationship to God, whether they see that in a tree, in nature, in a child, in whatever it is, whether it be formless or nameless or something that lives within them. I believe that every individual has the right to redefine their own relationship to that something bigger. And I believe that if we fail to do that and to give everyone the permission to do that, then we will have a hard time trying to recognize our divine relationship to one another.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. I mean,
Yeah.
because if this physical world is all there is, then yeah, you are very separate. I am very separate, and we don't relate in the divine way we were intended to relate, you know. Now, I'm a science person too, and my listeners are like, oh, there she goes again talking about science. But I love to talk about science too, because what we are talking about is shown in science, is shown in the quantum world. You know, the interconnectedness of all things, quantum entanglement, but also creation itself, creation of everything that we know in this reality came about, and in the Big Bang, whatever, and we are all connected, scientifically carbon-based beings. We are all connected, and we do communicate with each other energetically. There are no building blocks of the universe. There is energy. And we are transmitting that all the time. And to me, that's pretty damn spiritual. That's pretty damn God focused. You know, whether you call it God, whether you call it great spirit, great mystery, really doesn't matter, you know?
Yeah, I agree. You know, like I remember in the book, I tell a story about a conversation I was having with an atheist, and he's an academic. So to me, an academic has a level of knowledge that I won't pretend to have, right? My understanding is somewhat different. But I asked him, I said, do you not believe that there's some energy or force that is unseen that connects all living things? That I can just change my attitude and my emotion, and I can impact how you feel without touching you. That alone is energy. And he said, well, yes. I was like, well, then you believe in God.
Right.
You know, and I had another podcast with a guy recently, and his I think his show, he was an atheist. And his show was called Bible Says What or something like that. And he could not understand. You know, I explained to him, I said, there's no doubt in my mind that I exist beyond my body, and I will exist long after I leave my body. And we all will. And he could not understand how I could say that for truth and fact. And much to lend to what you're pointing to now, Rachel, it's a simple fact that every word, every action, and every thought I occupy and step into while I'm in this body, it carries a resonance and vibration that impacts the people around me. That everything I do is contributing to the evolution of human consciousness.
100%. Thank you for saying that.
So it is impossible for Rachel and Troy or our listeners to leave this podcast as the same people who came into it. I now live in you, and you live in me. Therefore, every interaction you have from this point on, I live in that too. Therefore, I am immortal, and I will live long after I leave my body.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
but he couldn't really grasp that, or he didn't want to.
It's hard. It's a hard concept to grasp unless you really, and I like to distill everything down to its smallest element. And when you know, the way you prefaced it was so beautiful. It's like, listen, if I walk into a room and I'm in a bad mood, you're going to feel that energy. That's going to
Yeah,
change your mood. Then your day may be affected, and that may affect other people. Right. And the converse is true. If you and I are resonating, if we're respecting each other, if we're coming from a place of capital L love, then that's going to get resonated. And not just
yeah.
to us, but to everything around us. Right. It changes the energy of a fucking room.
Hmm.
Right. Right. So
Yeah,
and because we can experience that, I think the difficulty is people have trouble making the leap between that and God, right?
yeah,
Because there's still this image of what God must mean. There's the
yeah,
the the patriarchal monotheistic God, which is
yeah,
not what we're talking about. I like Ken Wilber calls it Godhead. I like that too.
yeah. And you know what? I think also it's important to mention, Rachel, and it means so much to me because someone once asked me, they said, well, can I use another name for God? Why do I have to use it with God? Because they have all this resistance to this word God. And I said to them, of course you can. This is your relationship. I said, you can call it whatever you want. I say, but there's a lot of intention in my use of the word God. And I call spirit, Gaia, whatever. But I'm very intentional in still using the word God. And my reason for that is that if I don't, then I leave the impression that what I call divinity is different than what Christianity or religion or anything else refers to as God. And it would be impossible for me to impact or correct the misalignments done in the name of God if I didn't use the word God.
Mm.
You know, and I'm not willing to leave anyone behind.
Yeah.
So if that means that I have to use the word God to shift someone's previous perspective of what that means, then I'm willing to do that.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a big topic, and I can see why it's become a life path for you. Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and through the language of yoga, let's getting back to yoga.
yeah.
Is that your vehicle mainly, besides the writing and besides the speaking and these podcasts that you do, is yoga that vehicle for you to express all
Yeah,
all of these ideas?
yeah, in so many ways, you know, it's funny you asked that. In so many ways, you know, 2 years ago, um, and I'll mention two ways. 2 years ago, I led my first teacher training after 15 years. And it was the most phenomenal experience, I think. I've been at faculty on teacher trainings, I've done so many, and I've helped facilitate many. But that teacher training for me was, I have no words to describe it. But there was a moment where I broke down and I began to cry, and I was talking with my colleagues at the time who were helping me host this retreat. And I said, I don't want to teach yoga anymore.
Mhm.
I don't want to teach asana anymore because I just want to talk about God and love. That's all I want to do. And one of them said to me, brought me to recognize that yoga is my vehicle to doing that. Just like you mentioned, that when someone steps in a room with me to practice asana, yes, I teach asana in a really intimate, intentional, prayerful way. But it also allows me this space to communicate ideas for consideration and to talk about God and to talk about love. And one teacher that early on gave me permission to talk about God in the yoga space, the practice room, was Sean Corn, a teacher called Sean Corn, and who I'm sure you've heard of. But I was prior to that, I was actually told not to mention God in the room.
Really? Huh.
And I understand why. It was just a different approach to practice, right? But God is the very foundation of the practice of yoga. And I understand that some people may take it out to make it more digestible and palatable to where practitioners are at. And there's nothing wrong in that, one step at a time. But it's so important for us to recognize that God is the very foundation of it all. That if we can't recognize that, we're missing such a massive part of yoga practice and understanding,
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you, if in this last few moments here, if there was something that you could share with all of the listeners right now, something you really wish that they could know, what would it be?
Wow. I would want to invite them to consider that there is a seed of God that lives within them. And that seed of God lives in every other individual. Even the individuals that commit inhumane, outrageous, inconceivable acts within our society. That we need to understand that someone's conditioning is really different from that seed of God that lives within them. And while we fees, and there may even be necessary punishment that has to go along with the commitment of deeds of this kind, it's so important for us to understand that someone is different from their conditioning and their programming. And if we desire to make someone reprogram or to help them reprogram or recondition, then the very first thing we need to do is take the time to understand them and make them feel safe. Then we can help them reprogram.
Beautiful. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope everyone is taking notes.
Yeah. But it's not easy, right?
No, I know. That's why I said I hope everyone's taking notes.
Yeah.
Troy, how can people find you?
They can find me at troyhadeed.com. It's my website. I'm also pretty active on Instagram. And my book is available on Amazon.com. It's called My Name is Love. And if anyone has any questions at all.
Yep. Ooh, we lost you for a second, but I'm sure you'll come back. There
Rachel,
we go.
I'm back. I'm back. Did you lose me?
Yeah, just for a second, but we're all good. So yeah, so if anyone has any questions to give you contact, to reach out to you, I will have all of your links in the show notes. Troy Hadeed, thank you so much for a beautiful conversation today.
Thank you, Rachel. Have a beautiful day and thank you. Love.
Thank you.